And we continue at 1:06 in the afternoon on the Jon Phillips Show. Mr. Randy Wang's in Culver City.
John, last hour, as I played that explosion sound over and over again, it occurred to me that the two jackass teenagers from Santa Clarita might be in a youth cover band for the band Blur.
Well, at least they have marketable skills. They can sing, and they know chemistry.
Will writes in at johnnydontlikeshow@gmail.com. Are you sure the whole woohoo guy blowing stuff up wasn't Tom Likas? Here you go, Will.
800-222-5222 is the telephone number, 1-800-222-5222. It is our pleasure to welcome our next guest to the program. He is the publisher of The Flash Report, which you can get online at flashreport.org. He is also now on Substack, where he writes about not only California politics, but national politics as well. You can find him on Substack at Jon Fleischman. Jon Fleischman, welcome.
Hey, thanks, John. It's great to be with you.
Well, thanks so much for stopping by. So let's start out by talking about the big news in Washington that is going to impact the state of California. And by that, I'm, of course, referring to Congress voting to overturn Gavin Newsom's ridiculous 2035 electric vehicle mandate. And Gavin Newsom has already reacted to the news from Washington. And oh boy, are his panties in a wad.
We're not mandating. We're trying to reduce. We're not mandating anything. We're saying stop polluting through the tailpipe, which is, by the way, you do remember that because you remember a guy named Ronald Reagan. What was the Clean Air Act all about? They were mandating a reduction of pollution. I mean, come on, guys. You're buying talking points from the oil companies.
Yeah, referencing Ronald Reagan for a ridiculous regulation is real rich.
Well, Gavin Newsom's favorite thing to do right now is he's trying to be the adult in the room, and he keeps trying to pretend somehow he's, I don't know, more moderate or more even tempered, and then his own policies keep coming back to him. All the stuff. It's like if people would actually look at what he does, people who listen to this show know that he's a radical, ideological progressive, but that's not who he wants to position himself to be. But yeah, it was great news. It was, I think it's 6 a.m. this morning, our time, when the U.S. Senate voted 51-44 through a device that's called the Congressional Review Act, that within a certain number of days after the administration takes an action, they're able to undo the action. And so, not to go super wonky on your listeners, but back in the day when the Clean Air Act passed, there was an exception put in it that California could regulate more than the federal government does if they get a waiver from the federal government, of which there have been about 75 of these issued since the Clean Air Act passed, all, of course, during Democrat presidencies, all these waivers. And this latest one on the statewide mandate to ban cars that take gas, they submitted it, and it was not approved until basically the final month of the Biden administration. So they approved it on the way out the door, and actually today, this morning, it was a bipartisan vote. John, do you care to guess what a Democrat senator from what state would want to vote to end this?
My guess is...
What state makes a lot of gas cars?
Yeah, my guess is they've never rooted for Wisconsin in the Rose Bowl in their life.
Right, you got it. So one of the senators from Michigan voted with all the Republicans, and so the whole thing. You've talked about this many times before. We've got a very ideologically left-wing governor and state legislature who is on this kind of quixotic, almost religious quest to reduce man-made carbon emissions in a single state, in a single nation on the planet. And I can tell you that California's total, if you want to buy into their science that carbon emissions are destroying the world, the amount of carbon emissions that come out of California is infinitesimal compared to the whole planet. I mean, every day China brings on a new coal plant that produces more carbon emissions than California. So it's just bizarre, wacky. And so what happens is the people here in California have to bear the price of this through the higher gas prices, higher oil prices, home heating prices, higher everything prices. And the whole thing's crazy. And then I'll add one more thing on my little filibuster, because I think it's important. One of the biggest things that produces carbon emissions, especially here in California, is wildfires. Here's something that they don't like to pay attention to. In the last 2 years alone, more carbon emissions have spewed into the atmosphere than have been saved by every one of their regulations since the inception of clean air regulations in California. But they won't pivot to actually try to stop wildfires, because I think their agenda isn't really about clean air. It's about control and redistribution of wealth. And so I'm glad we had some sort of victory this morning. Lord knows we need one.
Well, here's what I also don't understand. If you're trying to create a successful, healthy new industry through regulation, you fundamentally have a problem on your hands. When people decided to start buying automobiles, when Henry Ford came out with the Model T, we didn't have to pass laws banning the horse and buggy. People looked at the Model T and they said, oh, I can get from point A to point B faster, and the Model T doesn't produce manure. I'm in.
Exactly. As a matter of fact, I'm one of those geeky people, so at 1 a.m., not that you aren't, John, but at 1 a.m. I was watching floor speeches before they voted on the great, big, beautiful bill, and Democrat after Democrat kept talking about how, oh, my God, you want to take away these clean air credits for cars, but they're doing so well, and they're like, one of these members of Congress on the Democrat side of the aisle literally said that oil companies and car companies are afraid of the competition. And you just have to laugh, because they can't compete unless they're getting massive subsidies or massive, jolts of tax credits from the government. So you're right. This would be the equivalent of if Henry Ford had said, well, I built this Model T, but it's not going to work unless you tax the car and buggy.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something else that's odd to me is you turn on cable news, you turn on CNN or MSNBC, and it's them vilifying Elon Musk from beginning to end. They just hate this guy with the hot, hot hate of 1,000 suns. Yet you look at what companies are selling electric vehicles. Chevrolet doesn't compare to Tesla. Ford doesn't compare to Tesla. Even the other all-electric companies. Rivian doesn't compare to Tesla. None of them do. So if you're going to vilify Elon Musk, but you want everyone to drive an electric car, that's like saying, everyone should start buying cookies, but I'm going to make little Debbie walk the plank. It makes no sense.
And you're watching it now up in the Bay Area, you've got a lot of lefties that are like getting rid of their Teslas. And I'm just, you just roll your eyes, and you realize that there's a huge double standard there, and that, the whole thing is, it's really much more about wealth redistribution and, socialism than it is about saving the planet from anything.
Well, and it's also quintessential Newsom, where he comes in with these big, grandiose proclamations, and there's no follow-through. He did that with this. He did that with nuclear power. Remember when he said he wanted to get rid of all the nuclear power facilities in California? And they told him, well, if you do that, the lights are going to go off. Oh, we'll just kick the can down the road a little bit.
Our most recent example is when he opens up his brand new podcast where he wants to joust with the hardcore right-wing people. By the way, not joust with people who understand his California record like you and me. He wants to go joust with like Charlie Kirk. But then like Charlie Kirk, on the show, he says, oh, it's unfair for women to be stuck with biological men playing in their sports. I oppose that. And then there were two bills in the legislature to oppose that, and he refused to support either bill.
Well, he did the same thing with
that's-
abortion. Remember when Arizona passed restrictive laws about abortion, and he said, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to set up abortion clinics all over the state of California. We're going to have more chop shops than we have Starbucks. And anyone from Arizona who wants to come over here and have an abortion, hell, have too. And he made a lot of news with that. He was on all the cable channels. Do you know that not one person from Arizona came into California for an abortion through his plan? Not one.
Not one.
But that's what he does.
So, well, and the interesting part is that somehow he puts on this act and people buy it, right? So fewer and fewer people in California. But like I was, you probably know Mark Halperin. He used to be with the ABC News, and he's got his own very successful YouTube show that he's on. And he has Gavin Newsom on as his first guest. And he has an entire thing about how, well, Gavin Newsom's not like all the other Democrats. He's more reasonable. He's a different kind of Democrat. And it's all because a very light glance at Gavin Newsom where you only listen to what he says is very different than the Gavin Newsom and what he actually does. Like, here's a great example. A great example of this would be you read the newspaper headlines and you would think that even though he had championed it, he has now cut off public funding for health care for illegal aliens in California. I read it in the LA Times. Big headline. Gavin Newsom curbs the program. But then you look at what he actually did, and what he actually did was nothing happens to anybody who's currently on the program other than starting years from now, they have to pay like $100 a month. Years from now. In other words, plenty of time for the next governor to reverse it. And then I think there's a provision that says that at the end of this year, anybody any illegal alien that's not signed up yet then can't join. And he introduces this, so it has no actual impact on the number of people the $9.3 billion that's being spent just this year alone. Never mind that only $2 or $3 billion were actually budgeted. Those people all get to stay on the program, and then he gets to win again because then the really radical left-wing Latino caucus, which is only made up of Democrat Latinos, they've banned any Republican Latinos from being in this legislative caucus. They hold a press conference attacking the governor. I'll bet you $100 they back-channeled and asked for the protest so that he could then go out there and say, look, I'm not the crazy, wacky guys. They are. But it's his program. It's his consequence. So once again, John, you're absolutely right in that his rhetoric does not match what he does, ever.
Let's assume for 1 second, because we know that basically what he's doing here is he's trying to position himself to be a viable candidate in Arizona, Nevada, Pennsylvania, Michigan on a general election ballot if he were to become the Democratic nominee. But if the rumors are true that former Vice President Kamala Harris is going to come back and run for governor of California, then she will be playing in his sandbox. And we know that the two of them will be rivals. They've made it a point in their political history to not run for the same office, to stay out of each other's way, coordinate with one another. You get the Senate seat, I get the gubernatorial seat, and let's not run against each other. We have the same donors, we have the same consultant, we have a lot of the same supporters, so let's not butt heads. But at this point, that's basically unavoidable. For both of them, it will be the presidency or bust. Anything else would be regarded as being a step backward. Do you think that those two are going to try to undercut one another now that they cannot avoid the collision and that is inevitable?
So the collision's going to happen. Frankly, I don't think she's going to run for governor, but she might, and she's famous for not liking to make difficult decisions and waiting to the last minute. But let's just for a moment say she runs for governor while he's running for president. Unfortunately, the pathway to become governor in California is going to involve critiquing a lot of the things he did. She's not going to be able to win the Democratic nomination without going after him and distancing herself from $20 billion lost in a scandal here and the big, massive, high-speed rail boondoggle over there. and not being able to handle homelessness at all, despite billions of dollars. I mean, you and I could literally spend an entire show reading, like Festivus. We could read a list of all the ways that this governor has been absolutely atrocious. But so she runs for governor. She's going to have to run against his record. And if she runs, there isn't room for the two of them in a Democratic primary for president, two from California. So they're going to have to go after each other to figure out who's the last, lefty standing. And while that would be very entertaining, you're right. They've worked so hard to avoid that, but I don't know how you avoid it. But, that having said, it's hard for me to imagine how Kamala Harris runs for president again, especially now. I'm already about halfway through Jake Tapper's new book. But, this former President Biden, was deteriorating. The entire country was being run by a group of people. They said he was like a director on the board of directors of his presidency. He chimed in when he wanted, but he wasn't in charge. And then you have to ask yourself, who had a regular standing weekly lunch with Joe Biden? I'm sure you know the answer.
Kamala Harris.
The vice president. So you're a former prosecutor, you're a former DA, you're a former attorney general, and you're having a lunch with somebody every week, and you're not able to discern cognitive decline that has been happening for years? Of course she did. And she was the elected office holder. People want to blame the doctor. People want to blame his staff. She, at the end of the day, had the responsibility to activate the 25th Amendment, I think it's the 25th, and say, this guy's not capable anymore. And she chose not to do it, and I don't know how she overcomes that to try to be a viable candidate for president again. I don't see how she does it.
Jon Fleischman, you can read him online at FlashReport.org, and you can subscribe to his Substack at Jon Fleischman. That's John without the H. And you can follow him on X at Flash Report. Jon Fleischman, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks for all you do, John. We'll see you.
If you'd like to email the show, you can do so at johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. That's johnnydon'tlikeshow@gmail.com. Let's go to Jaden in Oakland. Jaden, hello.
What's up, dog? Jaden, Oakland. I want to comment on Gavin Newsom when he was at that Fresh Laundry, probably getting quail eggs and canola grease for his hair, Dale. I don't think we should believe him on anything after what we caught him there. And I want to also say, you talked about Tom Likas. That's my boy. That's the best man to ever do radio. And I used to be a caller to Tom Likas. So Tom is hearing me right now. Tom, Jaden of Oakland loves you. And you were great even afterwards in Burbank. And I love you to have Tom Likas as a guest. Please, please, please. And blow me up, Tom.com. Tom Likas, baby. I love that man.
Here you go, Jaden.
You know,
Thank you for the call.
That was
We
great.
love Tom. And right now it's time to reopen the California Crime Blotter.
If the cashier is dummy,
Questions?
And Randy, this one involves an elected official, or I guess I should say yet another elected official, picked up on suspected DUI.
And this time it wasn't Wendy Carrillo.
Pushing and stressing and grinding.
Out of context, that sounds quite filthy.
This was State Senator Sabrina Cervantes out of Riverside, who was in a crash and got cited for a DUI in Sacramento. Why was she even driving? Don't they have drivers?
Well, and her sister ran for the state assembly last cycle, and I think the sister has 2 or 3 DUIs herself.
Yet another California political dynasty. For more, here's KCRA 3 in Sacramento.
A crash involving Riverside State Senator Sabrina Cervantes has Sacramento police accusing her of driving under the influence of a drug.
Oh, boy. What drug do we think it is?
Oh, now wait a minute. Didn't she go to the mat saying she hadn't been drinking?
Yes.
Okay. So they're saying under the influence of a drug, which could be alcohol or, I guess, other substances.
The crash happened Monday at the intersection of 14th and S Streets. According to Sacramento police, the senator was taken to the hospital for minor injuries. As part of the investigation, they sent officers to the hospital to check in with Cervantes. That's where they cited her with DUI. Sacramento police declining.
How many times in that hospital room did she say, "Do you know who I am"?
I'm a senator.
Sacramento police declining an on-camera interview, but sent us this statement. Responding officers contacted Senator Cervantes where they observed objective signs of intoxication.
And these guys, I'm sure, see this every single day.
Ossifer, I'm not as think as you drunk I am.
I sneezed. That's why I ran the car off the road. I sneezed.
Where they observed objective signs of intoxication and conducted a DUI investigation. From their investigation, officers issued Senator Cervantes a citation for suspicion of DUI. Sacramento police have not said which drug specifically she was cited for.
I notice how they're specifically saying a drug, because if it's alcohol, they just say alcohol.
Well, what time was the accident? Was it late at night?
I think it was in the morning.
Oh, really?
So uppers?
I don't know. At night, I guess if you take a sleeping pill or something, and then you decide you want some ice cream, that could get you in trouble.
Start pinballing up and down the road?
Maybe she's on Xanax. You're not supposed to drive on that, are you?
Is that a state senate thing? I thought that's a radio thing.
You know, we can look into her purse and see if it looks like Graceland.
Sacramento police have not said which drug specifically she was cited for. Cervantes is now accusing police of mistreatment. In a statement to KCRA 3, she said, on Monday afternoon,
wake up with a little bump?
Cervantes is now accusing police of mistreatment. In a statement to KCRA 3, she said, on Monday afternoon, while seeking care in the emergency room after my sedan was T-boned by a large SUV, I was accosted by Sacramento Police Department officers.
Okay, that's a very different story.
Okay, wait. So she didn't wait at the scene. She left the scene of the accident and went to the hospital.
Well, she's telling a completely different story from what the sworn officers of the Sacramento PD are saying. They're saying they arrived on the scene of the accident and took her to the hospital. She's claiming she was in the hospital and got accosted by the police.
Well, don't they wear cameras on their person?
Well, yes, they do.
Falsely accused of driving under the influence and involuntarily detained for several hours at the hospital. KCRA reached out to Sacramento police regarding the allegations. They responded saying, after reviewing officers' body camera footage, I didn't see any indication Senator Cervantes was accosted by officers.
Okay, so if they reviewed the tape and they say it disproves the claim that she made, that leads me to believe that she may not be truthful when she's making other claims.
Officers conducted a thorough investigation and remained professional and respectful throughout it. Police tell KCRA 3 that Cervantes had blood drawn at the hospital to determine if she had drugs or alcohol in her system. Police initially said it could take several days to weeks to get the results, but have since backtracked, saying they don't have a timeline. Cervantes...
They got to work on that backlog. I want to know right now.
Okay, is that them dragging their feet, or is that related to budget cuts? We know in L.A., for example, those positions, the people that performed those tests, were among those on the chopping block.
Or, unfortunately, this could be somebody up in Sacramento telling the police to make this go away.
It could be, because Sacramento is the seat of government in California. They know that they're supposed to look the other way unless there's an accident or something that demands their attention.
A lot of these members of the Assembly and State Senate are constantly going to functions, getting boozed up, making all kinds of deals, and then getting behind the wheel. Right, Wendy?
Pushing and stressing and grinding.
Well, her accident was here in L.A., and wasn't it at like 2 in the morning and she hit a bunch of parked cars?
She said it's because she didn't eat at the party.
And those parked cars did come out of nowhere like bats out of hell.
Cervantes says she asked for her own test at the hospital. Cervantes went on to say, I want to be clear. I did nothing wrong. The lab results I saw in the hospital show conclusively I had no alcohol in my system.
Wait, that's not what they're alleging.
Okay, so they're alleging drugs, and she's saying that she did not test positive for alcohol, or at least over 0.08.
That's two different tests.
It seems like she's trying to get cute with words.
Yes, I tested negative for alcohol, but what were you on? Perkies? Xanny bars?
Yeah.
Lil Molly?
And then she said the cops were nasty to her.
I expect this.
Then it definitely wasn't Molly, because she would have been hugging them.
I expect this to be quickly and justly resolved. State Senate Leader Mike McGuire says she has his support.
Of course, Mr. Hogwash gets to weigh in on this.
There's been some hogwash.
Yeah. Leave it to him to hear that story and not come up with that answer.
My understanding is that the lab results have been released. The results show that she was not under the influence of alcohol, was not under the influence of any type of drug or any.
Well, no, that's not what she said. She only said she wasn't under the influence of alcohol.
Yeah. No, he is trying to paraphrase what she said, and he is changing the meaning of what she said.
Was she chewing on pot gummies while in the car?
Well, I would imagine, just smelling it around you 24/7, that there are a lot of people behind the wheel who are high as kites on marijuana.
The time. Constantly.
Was not under the influence of any type of drug or any other substance, and I do believe that her name will be cleared.
If you're him, why would you be willing to go out on a limb for her? Wouldn't you say the police are investigating and we'll find out more later?
Got to protect his own.
So we did reach out to Senator Cervantes about what police said about her having drugs in her system. We have yet to hear back. Now, KCRA 3 did request that body camera footage of the incident, and hopefully...
Please, 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 please send it to my inbox.
I wonder if it was the opposite, where she was nasty to them.
Most likely.
And hopefully we will obtain that in the coming weeks or days. Reporting live here in Midtown, Andres Valle, KCRA 3 News.
There you go. Sabrina Cervantes says, I tested negative for alcohol. The cop says, no, it's drugs.
And then the president pro tem of the Senate, Mike McGuire, said she says that she tested negative for alcohol and drugs. Time will tell. And right now it's time to reopen the California Crime Blotter.
If the cashier is dummy.
Questions?
And Randy, this edition involves a 75-year-old who was a crime victim and decided that they were going to fight back.
This was a woman in Fontana, California, who was about to be the victim of a fake utility worker robbery when she realized what was going on and said, I'm not putting up with this. For more, here is KCAL.
Only on KCAL News tonight, a man posing as an inspector tries to trick a Fontana woman and ends up in a fight.
That's right. In a story you won't see anywhere else, our Nicole Comstock.
Why do news stations have to constantly tell us that this is the only place you're going to see this story?
I don't know, because it's probably all over social media, too.
And all the other news channels. But sure, you can only see it on us.
Story you won't see anywhere else. Our Nicole Comstock shows us how this time he picked the wrong victim.
This woman tells us she doesn't even usually answer her door for anyone, but there had been water shutoffs in the neighborhood recently. And so when this guy showed up in a uniform with a clipboard, she thought he was there for a legitimate reason. Sammy Holguin walks with a cane, but don't let that fool you. She's apparently the wrong 75-year-old little lady to mess with.
He pushed on the side of my head, but he could. I was dancing with him.
Well, maybe she could hit him with the cane like Mr. Fuji.
He pushed on the side of my head, but he could. I was dancing with him.
Don't mess with the Fontucky grandma.
She sounds like a granny character that you would see on television.
And everything. And I think he was very surprised.
How close is Fontana to Hesperia?
Same county.
It's your people.
You know, they call it Fontucky.
and everything. And I think he was very surprised.
She was surprised, too, after she let a thief convincingly disguised as a water inspector into her Fontana home to check her water line. She realized he had no business being there.
So I went to the bottom of the stairs, and some very colorful language told him to get his caboose back downstairs.
I love her.
I wonder what kind of colorful language she used.
Some very colorful language told him to get his caboose back downstairs.
I bet you she said something like, "Get the heck out of here."
Yeah, I don't think we'd have to bleep what she said if she's saying the word caboose.
Well, I'll tell you, sometimes you're surprised who has a foul mouth. Maybe she dropped words that we can't even come close to saying on the radio.
He's standing there holding that cane. He turned and went that direction. I saw my pink wallet in his back pocket. So I grabbed at him and pushed him into the door jamb of the bathroom, grabbed my wallet, and shoved it down in my pants. It went all the way down by my knees.
Oh, God.
Don't mess with Granny.
I wonder why she didn't put it in her pocket.
Some girls' pants don't have pockets.
So I grabbed at him and pushed him into the door jamb of the bathroom, grabbed my wallet, and shoved it down in my pants. It went all the way down by my knees.
Well, if he goes searching for that wallet, then you may have some other problems.
And started tussling with him.
Tussling?
And started tussling with him.
Sammy says she ran down the street after him, but he was too fast. So she sat down and called 911. She later found her purse and checkbook were missing.
At the time the detectives located him, he was actually talking to another senior citizen in the Los Angeles area, apparently trying to pull the same scam with that person.
Officer Steve Reed with Fontana PD says detectives arrested 52-year-old Rocky Marks.
Notice how when this story is in the Inland Empire, it ends with an arrest.
And by the way, you're 52 years old, and this is what you're doing with your time? Idiot.
Officer Steve Reed with Fontana PD says detectives arrested 52-year-old Rocky Marks on several felony counts, including robbery, burglary, elder abuse, and theft from an elder. They say he has many different aliases, many phony work uniforms, and has been running the same scam on elderly people for decades.
Whoa.
This is like the remedial version of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
He's a master of disguise.
He's been arrested for similar crimes in multiple states over the past 20 years.
Police discovered Marks ran the inspector scam on another woman in Fontana last month, taking jewelry, they say, after entering her home. And so they believe there are other victims across SoCal and encourage them to call police.
A lot of seniors get victimized and they become embarrassed. They don't want to tell their kids what happened.
Other women need to know not to be foolish.
And also, just because someone has a clipboard doesn't mean they're official.
Other women need to know not to be foolish.
Of course, Sammy's kids are just glad she's okay. As for what she thinks of the suspect,
get a life.
She's glad.
I love her.
Get a life.
She's glad he's behind bars, but
if I had $1 million, I'd bail him out and wail on him.
She's going Old Testament.
If I had $1 million, I'd bail him out and wail on him.
I don't know if this was an audition or what, but this woman needs a reality show right now. The Real House Grandmas of Fontana.
Talk about picking the wrong house to launch this scam on. This guy thought he was going to go into the house. He'd find some little old lady. He'd take all her jewelry. He'd take her wallet, and he'd be off to the next house. Little did he know that he'd get beat up by the last surviving Confederate widow.
I would. It made me mad.
Fontana police say if someone who looks like a utility worker shows up at your door, don't let them in unless you scheduled an inspection, or at least call the company directly to confirm their identity. Nicole Comstock, KCAL News.
There you go. That granny don't take no guff from nobody.
He pushed on the side of my head, but he could. I was dancing with him.
I'll tell you this, if you're 52 years old and you still haven't gotten with the program, there's nothing we can do to fix you.
This is where 3 strikes really came in handy, because this guy will never belong in society. This guy will only victimize people as long as we let him. So you got to keep him away forever.
I realize that he didn't commit an act of murder. He didn't commit an act of arson. He's not a terrorist or anything like that. But if you ever allowed this guy the opportunity to be on the outside again, this is what he knows. And it's tough to train an old dog to do new tricks. And you're just never going to change this guy. This guy needs to be removed from society and never let back in.
If I had $1 million, I'd bail him out and wail on him.
And every time you hit him with that cane, lady, the candy comes out.
Got 2 drops out of that story.